The key to passing FM, just like in all of the ACCA exams, is to practice as many questions as you can. But it's not just about quantity, it's quality and getting as much as you can out of that question practice. And that's what this recording is going to focus on, helping you to squeeze as much learning as possible from your question practice and using effective debriefing and self-marking to be able to do that. My name's Ben Wilson. I'm the expert ACCA tutor for financial management papers, and I'm going to be taking you through today's session. We're going to go through three things. Firstly, the benefits of self-marking and why you should do it. Then we're going to have a look at calculation questions for FM, and we're going to use an actual calculation question from the September-December 20 exam paper to illustrate how to mark. We're then going to do the same thing for written requirements, again using a question from the September-December 20 paper. I'd really advise you actually to have a go at that exam paper first before watching the rest of the recording so that you can get as much as possible out of it. It's the September-December 2020 exam. So, benefits of self-marking, why you should do it. This is a huge thing for me. When you mark your own answer, you start to think like a marker, and you start to realize that the marker of your script is a human being. It's a real person with feelings and needs. And you want to try to make their life as easy as possible, because if you make their life easy, it's easier for them to give you marks, and that's what you want really, isn't it? So see them as a person rather than a machine. Your script doesn't always get every single mark it deserves if you don't make it easy to mark. And so what we want to do is make our scripts easy to mark so that the marker can give us more credit. When we're self-marking, we're going to be looking at the examiner's model answers, and through reading those, we start to get an understanding of how the examiner thinks. And the more you can understand how the examiner thinks, you start to see through their questions, start to see to what they're actually getting at, and you can start to design your answers to hit the things that the examiner wants. And this is the end game. This is the goal. Through self-marking, you'll change the way that you present your answers to make them easier to mark. Because you've humanized the marker, you want to make their life as easy as possible. Right, let's focus on calculation questions first of all. So in a calculation question, what I'm looking for in my answer, what I'm reviewing, is was it logical? Is it, when someone's reviewing it afterwards with a fresh mind, can they see the flow of my numbers at a glance? Have my workings been explained? Because if they haven't, then the marker might struggle to see what I've done. If I've explained my workings, firstly, it makes it easier for the marker to follow. But secondly, I'm showing them that I've really understood what I'm doing in the numbers. And that really reflects well on me as a student. And I know that the marker will think positively on my answer if they know I've really understood what I'm doing through explaining myself. And I want to make sure that the own figure rule can be applied to my calculations. That means if I make a little mistake somewhere, everything flows so logically and is so easy to see that that little mistake only costs me half a mark and I pick up all of the later marks from that point onwards. That's only possible if I've hit those first 2 points, having a logical structure and explained my workings clearly. Right, let's have a look at Crockett Co., which is the last question from the September-December 2020 FM exam. And we're going to have a look at the first calculation question on it. Here we are in the ACCA's TestReach software. And this is the September-December 20 exam. And we're doing the Crockett Co. question. And we're just going to look at, for the calculation question, we're going to look at this one here, calculating the net present value of Project B, this 4-mark question. Here's the scenario showing on screen. Project B had an initial outlay of 1,500, and here are the cash flows associated with Project B. and a little bit of narrative about some inflation rates that apply to these cash flows and something about the cost of capital being 10%. If you haven't had a go at this question already yourself, then I'd suggest pausing here and having a stab at doing the calculation. Now, in the ACCA's practice platform software, now here is the model answer showing on screen. And here is my answer. I've prepared this one. It's not a great answer. As you can see, the answer is wrong. Something's gone wrong here. But what I'd like you to do is to have a go at marking this answer. How many is it worth out of 4? Here's the marking scheme for the 4 marks. Inflated sales is worth 1, inflated cost is worth 1, and the MPV is worth 2. So that line there, 1. The costs is 1 mark, and then all of the work from down here is worth a further 2. How many do you think this is worth? Now, that was a little bit mean of me because a lot of the workings on this are shown in formulas, and you need to click into the cells. Now, actually, the marker can click into the cells when they're reviewing your answer, so they can go through and audit this. But is it clear what the student has done? So I can see in this one, they've taken a revenue and then added 4%. They've taken a cost and added 5%. So it looks like for T1, they've done the right thing. They've grown by 4% and 5%. But for T2, they've taken correct figures to start with, but I don't really know. They've not. I can't see what these numbers are that they're multiplying by. And the answer itself is wrong. 528 they've got for T2 when it should be 642. And I can't really make sense of these workings. I don't know what the student has done here. So I can't give marks for these cash flows. What they have done well, though, is use the MPV formula. So they have correctly done the present value of the T1 to T4 cash flows, and they have subtracted off the T0 cash flow, getting us to an MPV figure. So marking this, the student's going to get 0 for those cash flows because I can't see their workings. I can't understand them. But they are going to get 2 marks here for their MPV calculation because they've done everything correct here, although they made a mistake in the earlier numbers. They have been able to get the own figure because I can see what they've done. And look, they have explained their workings quite nicely here with this minus the T0 value. Okay, so I'm going to give that 2 out of 4. Have a look at this as an alternative answer, though. Now, here showing on screen, you can see that this answer is also incorrect. I mean, it's not out by as much, but it is not quite right. But look how nice these workings are. And it's going to be quite easy for us to audit and find out where the student went wrong here. So I can look at my inflows and see what the student has done. They've taken the original cash flow, then added 4% inflation to get to an inflated cash flow figure. And I can see actually that all of these inflated cash flows are correct. They match the inflated sales here. So I can give 1 mark here for these cash flows. What about for the outflows? When I come down here, I can see that something's gone wrong. That 152 looks correct, and that 185 looks correct, but these ones are wrong. Oh, I can see what's happened. The 5% inflation hasn't been added correctly in these 2 cells. Ah, yes. They've not correctly added 5% inflation onto these T3 and T4 years. But I can see that most of this has been done right. So I'm going to give this half a mark because they've done half of it right, but not the other half. And then up here, I can go into, see, have they done the MPV bit right? Yes, they have. They've used the formula correctly. They've taken the 4 years of the project, T1 to T4, and applied a 10% discount factor to it. So that's been done correctly, and they've taken off the $1,500 initial investment, so that bit has been done right. So that bit's worth 2 marks. So because this working was presented nicely down here, this answer is able to pick up an extra 1.5 marks. So it gets 3.5 in total over the original presentation, which didn't pick up those partial marks because it didn't show the workings clearly. Let's now consider written requirements in the FM exam. What things are we looking for when we're reviewing our answers here? Firstly, have all parts of the requirement been answered fully? So often in FM, there'll be more than one requirement in a single question, and I want to make sure I've answered all bits. Next, has my answer got sufficient depth? I need to take the verb into account. If it's something like list, then I can have a short point, short sentence. But if it's a more detailed verb, something like explain, evaluate, or describe, then I'm going to need a couple of sentences at least to really give sufficient clarity to answer the question that's been set. And that brings us on to the third point. Has the specific question been answered? Sometimes I can only really realise this when I look at the examiner's model answer and think, oh, they went down a different route to me. Ah, yes, I didn't actually answer the question that had been set here. So to put these three into practice and see how to review an answer, we're going to be using the September-December 2020 FM exam paper and that Crockett Co question, and we're going to be looking at the third part of it. Here we are back in the Test Reach software, and down here in the question stem, there's some information around investment decision 3. That's what's relevant to this question. So just pause so you can have a read of that. We're told about lots of different inflation rates. And if we come back up, we can see the question stem here is in relation to investment decision 3, describe the 2 approaches for dealing with inflation and provide a reason recommendation as to which approach Crockett Co's management should follow. It's 6 marks. And here's the marking scheme showing. Specific inflation, cost of capital, nominal method, real method, other points, and recommendation. Each of those are worth 1 mark each. Okay, so it's just like lots of FM marking schemes, 1 mark per point. But sometimes it's hard to know whether the point that's been made earns that mark. So we know the marking scheme is 1 mark per point. Let's have a look at the examiner's model answer. So they've taken the tactic of having a structure of 2 areas, one for nominal and one for real. And then, a lot of detail here on the choice of approach and a recommendation. They've got a lot of structure to their answer. Now, showing on screen, you can see an answer here. This is not a great answer. Do not be copying this in the exam. This is to illustrate and to help us for a little bit of a marking exercise. So I want you to pause the recording here and have a go at marking this. Remember, it's 1 mark per relevant point. Okay, let's talk together. There are 4 points made here. The first one is a bit of an introductory point. It doesn't really say anything. And so that first point is going to score 0. It's just an intro. And in fact, it's a waste of time. Learning point for you there. Don't bother with an introduction because it doesn't earn you anything. Then, firstly, the company should consider using the money at money method. This means that money cash flows should be used and money discount factors too. Now, this is on the way to being a right answer. The money method is an alternative description for the nominal method. So had this been well explained, it could have scored marks. But as it stands, it's all too technical. There isn't a description of the technique. It's using too much technical jargon. And so this isn't worth much. I think most generous I can do is give that half a mark. And what about the second point? The third point. Secondly, real at real could be used. This means you leave the cash flows uninflated, but have a discount rate that is also uninflated. Okay, that is a bit more detailed, isn't it? It's using the real method, which is in the marking scheme, but it also gives the correct description. You leave the inflation rate out of everything. So I think I can give that one a full mark. And what about the recommendation? The company should use the money at money method. Now, if you look at the requirement up here, it says provide a reasoned recommendation, and that means explain your recommendation. This is not a reasoned recommendation. It's better than nothing, but it hasn't explained why they should go for the money at money method. So the most generous I can be is half a mark for this. It does conclude and recommend, but it doesn't back up its point. So I think this is worth 2 marks out of the available 6. How did that compare to your mark? Let's now have a look at a much better answer. Now, things that make this answer better. There's no introduction, and it's structured around the requirement. It's a 2 methods, so money method and real method, and then a reasoned recommendation. And let's go through each of the points. So cash flow should be inflated by the specific inflation rate. Sales would be inflated by 2%, material costs at 4 to 6%. That's how the money method works. And then we also inflate the discount rate using the general rate of inflation. So we're going to get a mark there for our description of the technique, and also another mark for talking about the discount rate, the cost of capital. So 2 marks earned there. What about under the real method? This is correctly described. We do not include inflation in the cash flows, and we do not include it in the discount rate either. So that's a mark for a nicely described description of the real method. In the mark scheme, there was also a mark for other points. And I think actually this is a really good explanation under both the money method and the real method. It talks about the size of the cash flows and the size of the cost of capital. So I think across these 2 points, I think this is showing good understanding and therefore scores another mark. The reasoned recommendation then. So we have said use the money method just like before. So that's going to get half a mark just for a recommendation. But it's saying why the real method would be inaccurate, because there is more than one rate of inflation in this question. So that's worth a mark there for explaining what's wrong with the real method. And that's worth a mark here for describing what is right about the money method. Because there are several different inflation rates, the money method would give a more accurate result. And so this better presented answer with structure that really follows the requirement and sufficient depth because of the verb in the question, when we present it like this, we're going to give it the full 6 out of 6. That's it for this marking recording. I hope you found it useful, particularly looking at those better presented answers for how you can present your own work to score more marks.